A lot has changed in the world since we started the Interdependence Print Studio, and a lot has changed this year. And it became necessary for us to use this Zoom platform to bring everyone together. But a short overview regarding the embroidery. Many of you have already received embroidery kits in the mail, and for those of you who are interested in receiving a kit, please email Jen Curtis from the Metabolic team. Maybe Jen, you could put your email in the chat, and also you can just private message or even message just in the chat to Jen and coordinate with her. In the kit, you'll find a line drawing on fabric of a botanical plant, which is part of the food and medicine that the Metabolic Studio is currently growing on 2 studio sites along the LA River. We're also growing food and medicine up in Payahunadu, so-called Owens Valley, where Los Angeles steals its water, and in Vermont as an effort to give away free food to folks in need right now. We drew images of the plants we're growing, transferred the images onto fabric, which we then sent out to our community members, along with an embroidery hoop, needles, and thread. And in the kit, you should have also received a self-addressed return envelope with postage. So when you've finished your piece, you can mail it back to the studio, and it will eventually become stitched together in a larger community quilt that will be exhibited in the future and accessible on our website. So please continue to talk to Jen about getting involved. And this space is intended to provide a time for us all to be together when we cannot physically be together, and to create an opportunity for us to talk and exchange ideas while using our hands to craft. A week after we hosted our initial embroidery circle, the world changed. The witnessing of the murder of George Floyd broadcasted across the globe while in the midst of a lockdown. During a global pandemic, Metabolic collectively decided to turn our focus on educating ourselves and our community about systemic racism. This gathering is specifically focused on prison and prison abolition, a topic that has decades of literature for us to dive into. Questions like, how can we do better? How can we become better active accomplices in the movement for Black lives? One way is to hold space for reading and discussions that can help provide the fertile soil for a vibrant future where we can all thrive. And tonight we're going to be reading an open letter from Assata Shakur, written in 1998. It was her birthday yesterday, and we'd like to hold this space both to learn about her experience and also to celebrate her as a revolutionary beacon of light. So I'm going to put in the chat the reading again for folks who just arrived. It's available online for free. There are some slight typos in it, I think because it's a free copy, but it's fairly easy to read. So if anyone wants to read along with us or even read out loud with us, I know we have a community member, Joan, who wants to do that tonight. And I think Red, you wanted to read with us. And Dee, are you interested in reading with us tonight? Great. So this is a shorter reading, so we are going to take shorter bits of reading out loud so that we can all read out loud together and have enough time for everyone. Also, I wanted to play at the end a clip that is going to be referenced in this piece. You'll learn more about it as we go, but I thought it would be important for us to watch a little snippet at the end that might give some insight into what we're reading about. And lastly, I think it's important to talk about content warnings. There's no specific moment in this reading that either of us felt needed to be specifically, mentioned. But it is important to note that this is a really brutal and aggressive history and story. So feel free to take space if you need. Feel free to come in and out. Just know that this is heavy, and she has a really painful story. So it's important to hear, and it's also important to note that that's involved. And then lastly, the N-word is used in this reading. For any white folks or non-Black people of color in this group, I really strongly encourage that no one uses that word and that we follow using, quote, the N-word, not saying that word out loud. And I appreciate everyone complying with that. So without further ado.
Does anyone have any questions or anything? All right.
So Ryan's gonna start. Then he'll pass to me. I'll pass to Joan. And then Joan, you can pass to Red. Red can pass to D. And then D, you can pass back to Ryan.
Yeah, we have time. All right. Open letter from Asada Shakur. This is from 1998. My name is Asada Shakur, and I am a 20th century escaped slave. Because of government persecution, I was left with no other choice than to flee from the political repression, racism, and violence that dominate the US government's policy toward people of color. I am an ex-political prisoner, and I have been living in exile in Cuba since 1984. I have been a political activist most of my life, and although the US government has done everything in its power to criminalize me, I am not a criminal, nor have I ever been one. In the 1960s, I participated in various struggles: the Black Liberation Movement, the Student Rights Movement, and the movement to end the war in Vietnam. I joined the Black Panther Party. By 1969, the Black Panther Party had become the #1 organization targeted by the FBI's COINTELPRO program. Because the Black Panther Party demanded the total liberation of Black people, J. Edgar Hoover called it, quote, the greatest threat to the internal security of the country, end quote, and vowed to destroy it and its leaders and activists. In 1978, my case was one of the many cases brought before the United Nations organization in a petition filed by the National Conference of Black Lawyers, the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and the United Church of Christ Commission for Racial Justice, exposing the existence of political prisoners in the United States, their political prosecution, and the cruel and inhumane treatment they receive in the US prisons. According to the report, quote, the FBI and the New York Police Department in particular charged and accused Asada Shakur of participating in attacks on law enforcement personnel and widely circulated charges and accusations among police agencies and units. The FBI and the NYPD further charged her as being a leader of the Black Liberation Army, which the government and its respective agencies described as an organization engaged in the shooting of police officers. This description of the Black Liberation Army and the accusation of Asada Shakur's relationship to it is widely circulated by government agents among police agencies and units. As a result of these activities by the government, Ms. Shakur became a hunted person. Posters in police precincts and banks described her as being involved in serious criminal activities. She was highlighted on the FBI's most wanted list, and to police at all levels, she became a shoot-to-kill target, end quote. I was falsely accused in 6 different, quote, criminal cases, and in all 6 of these cases, I was eventually acquitted or the charges were dismissed. The fact that I was acquitted or that the charges were dismissed did not mean that I received justice in the courts. That was certainly not the case. It meant that the evidence presented against me was so flimsy and false that my innocence became evident. The political persecution was part and parcel of the government's policy of eliminating political opponents by charging them with crimes and arresting them with no regard to the factual basis of such charges. On May 2nd, 1973, I, along with Zaid Malik Shakur and Sundiata Akuli, were stopped on the New Jersey Turnpike, supposedly for, quote, faulty taillight. Sundiata Akuli got out of the car to determine why we were stopped. Zaid and I remained in the car. State Trooper Harper then came to the car, opened the door, and began to question us because we were Black and riding in a car with a Vermont license plate. He claimed he became suspicious. He then drew his gun, pointed it at us, and told us to put our hands up in the air in front of us where he could see them. I complied, and in a split second, there was a sound that came from outside the car. There was a sudden movement, and I was shot, once with my arms held up in the air, and then once again from the back. Zaid Malik Shakur was later killed. Trooper Werner Forster was killed, and even though Trooper Harper admitted that he shot and killed Zaid Malik Shakur under the New Jersey felony murder law, I was charged with killing both Zaid Malik Shakur, who was my closest friend and comrade, and was charged in the death of Trooper Forrester. Never in my life have I felt such grief. Zaid had vowed to protect me and to help me to get to a safe place, and it was clear that he had lost his life trying to protect both me and Sundiata. Although he was also unarmed and the gun that killed Trooper Forrester was found under Zaid's leg, Sundiata Akoli was also captured later, was also charged with both deaths. Neither Sundiata Akoli nor I ever received a fair trial. We were both convicted in the news media way before trials. No news media was ever permitted to interview us, although the New Jersey police and the FBI fed stories to the press on a daily basis. In 1977, I was convicted by an all-white jury and sentenced to life, plus 33 years in prison. In 1979, fearing that I would be murdered in prison and knowing that I would never receive any justice, I was liberated from prison, aided by committed comrades who understood the depths of the injustice in my case, and were also extremely fearful for my life.
The U.S. Senate's 1976 Church Commission report on intelligence operations inside the USA revealed that, quote, the FBI has attempted covertly to influence the public's perception of persons and organizations by disseminating derogatory information to the press, either anonymously or through, quote, friendly news contacts, end quote. This same policy is evidently still very much in effect today. On December 24th, 1997, the New Jersey State called a press conference to announce that New Jersey State Police had written a letter to Pope John Paul II, asking him to intervene on their behalf and to aid in having me extradited back to New Jersey prisons. The New Jersey State Police refused to make their letter public, knowing that they had probably totally distorted the facts and attempted to get the Pope to do the devil's work in the name of religion. I decided to write to the Pope to inform him about the reality of, quote, justice for Black people in the state of New Jersey and in the United States. In January of 1998, during the Pope's visit to Cuba, I agreed to do an interview with NBC journalist Ralph Penza around my letter to the Pope about my experiences in New Jersey's court system and about the changes I saw in the United States and its treatment of Black people in the last 25 years. I agreed to do this interview because I saw this secret letter to the Pope as a vicious, vulgar publicity maneuver on the part of the New Jersey State Police and as a cynical attempt to manipulate Pope John Paul II. I have lived in Cuba for many years and was completely out of touch with the sensationalist, dishonest nature of the establishment media today. It is worse than it was 30 years ago. After years of being victimized by the, quote, establishment media, it was naive of me to hope that I might finally get the opportunity to tell my side of the story. Instead of an interview with me, what took place was a staged media event in 3 parts, full of distortions, inaccuracies, and outright lies. NBC purposely misrepresented the facts. Not only did NBC spend thousands of dollars promoting this exclusive interview series, they also spent a great deal of money advertising this exclusive interview on Black radio stations and also placed notices in local newspapers. All right, I'm going to pass this off to Joan.
Okay. Distortions and lies in the NBC series. In an NBC interview, Governor Whitman was quoted as saying that, quote, "This has nothing to do with race. This has everything to do with crime," unquote. Either Governor Whitman is completely unfamiliar with the facts in my case, or her sensitivity to racism and to the plight of Black people and other people of color in the United States is at a sub-zero level. In 1973, the trial in Middlesex County had to be stopped because of the overwhelming racism expressed in the jury room. The court was finally forced to rule that the entire jury panel had been contaminated by racist comments like, quote, "If she's Black, she's guilty," unquote. In an obvious effort to prevent us from being tried by, quote, "a jury of our peers," unquote, the New Jersey courts ordered that a jury be selected from Morris County, New Jersey, where only 2.2% of the population was Black, and 97.5% of the potential jurors were white. In a study done in Morris County, one of the wealthiest counties in the country, 92% of the registered voters said that they were familiar with the case through the news media, and 72% believed we were guilty based on pre-trial publicity. During the jury selection process in Morris County, white supremacists from the National Social White People's Party wearing swastikas demonstrated carrying signs reading, quote, "Support white police," unquote. The trial was later moved back to Middlesex County, where 70% thought I was guilty based on pretrial publicity. I was tried by an all-white jury where the presumption of innocence was not the criteria for jury selection. Potential jurors were merely asked if they could, quote, "put their prejudices aside and render a fair verdict," unquote. The basic reality in the United States is that being Black is a crime and Black people are always, quote, "suspects," unquote, and an accusation is usually a conviction. Most people still think that being, quote, "a Black militant" or a Black revolutionary, unquote, is tantamount to being guilty of some kind of crime. The current situation in New Jersey's prisons underlines the racism that dominates the politics of the state of New Jersey, in particular, and in the US as a whole. Although the population of New Jersey is approximately 78% white, more than 75% of New Jersey's prison population is made up of Blacks and Latinos. 80% of the women in Jersey prisons are people of color. That may not seem like racism to Governor Whitman, but it reeks of racism to us. The embassy story implied that Governor Christie Whitman raised the reward for my capture based on my interview with NBC. The fact of the matter is that she has been campaigning since she was elected into office to double the reward for my capture. In 1994, she appointed Colonel Carl Williams, who immediately vowed to make my capture a priority. In 1995, Governor Whitman sought to, quote, "match a $25,000 departmental appropriation sponsored by an unidentified legislator," unquote. I watched a tape of Governor Whitman's, quote, "testimony," unquote, in her interview with NBC. She gave a very dramatic, exaggerated version of what happened, but there is no evidence whatsoever to support her claim that Trooper Forster had, quote, 4 bullets in him at least, and that they got up with his own gun, fired 2 bullets into his head, unquote. She claimed that she was writing Janet Reno for federal assistance in my capture based on what she saw in the NBC interview. If this is the kind of, quote, "information," unquote, that is being passed on to Janet Reno and the Pope, it is clear that the facts have been totally distorted. Whitman also claimed that my return to prison should be a condition for, quote, "normalizing relations with Cuba," unquote. How did it get so important that my life can determine the foreign relations between two governments? Anybody who knows anything about New Jersey politics can be certain that her motives are purely political. She, like Torricelli, and several other opportunistic politicians in New Jersey came to power as part-time lobbyists for the Batista faction, soliciting votes from right-wing Cubans. They want to use my case as a barrier for normalizing relations with Cuba and as a pretext for maintaining the immoral blockade against the Cuban people. And I'm going to pass now. Is it to Red?
Can everyone hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh. In what can only be called deliberate deception and slander, NBC aired a photograph of a woman with a gun in her hand, implying that the woman in the photograph was me. I was not, in fact, the woman in the photograph. The photograph was taken from a highly publicized case where I was accused of bank robbery. Not only did I voluntarily insist on participating in a lineup during which witnesses selected another woman, but during the trial, several witnesses, including the manager of the bank, testified that the woman in the photograph was not me. I was acquitted of that bank robbery. NBC aired the photograph on at least 5 different occasions, representing the woman in the photograph as me. How is it possible that the New Jersey State Police, who claim to have a detective working full-time on my case, Governor of New Jersey, Christine Whitman, who claims she reviewed all the evidence, or NBC, which has extensive research department, did not know that the photograph was false? It was vile, fraudulent attempt to make me look guilty. NBC deliberately misrepresented the truth. Even after many people had called in, and there was massive fax and email campaign protesting NBC's mutilation of the facts, Ralph Penzer and NBC continued to broadcast that photograph, representing it as me. Not once has the New Jersey State Police, Governor Christine Whitman, or NBC come forth and stated that I was not the woman in the photograph, or that I had been acquitted of that charge. Another major lie and distortion was the fact that we had left Trooper Werner Foster on the roadside to die. The truth is that there was a major cover-up as to what happened on May 2nd, 1973. Trooper Harper, the same man who shot me with my arms raised in the air, testified that he returned to the state police headquarters, which was less than 200 yards away, to seek aid. However, tape recordings and police reports made on May 2nd, 73, prove that not only did Trooper Harper give several conflicting statements about what happened on the turnpike, but that he never once mentioned the name Werner Foster, or the fact that the incident took place right in front of the troopers' headquarters. In an effort to hide his tracks and cover his guilt, he said nothing whatsoever about Foster to his superiors or to his fellow officers. In a clear attempt to discredit me, Colonel Carl Williams of the New Jersey State Police was allowed to give blow-by-blow distortions of my interview. In my interview, I stated that on the night of May 2nd, 73, I was shot with my arms in the air, then again shot in the back. Williams stated that it is absolutely false. Our records show that she reached in her pocketbook, pulled out a 9mm weapon and started firing. However, the claim that I reached into my pocketbook and pulled out a gun while inside the car was even contested by Trooper Harper. Although on 3 official reports, and when he testified before the grand jury, he stated that he saw me take the gun out of my pocketbook, he finally admitted under cross-examination that he never saw me with my hands in a pocketbook, never saw me with a weapon inside the car, and that he did not see me shoot him. The truth is that I was examined by 3 medical specialists, a neurologist who testified that I was immediately paralyzed immediately after being shot. Second, a surgeon who testified that it was absolutely anatomically necessary that both arms be in the air for Miss Chesimard to receive the wounds. The same surgeon also testified that the claim that Trooper Harper that I had been crouching in a firing position when I was shot was totally anatomically impossible. Third, a pathologist who testified that there is no conceivable way that the bullet could have traveled over to hit the clavicle if her arm was down. He said it was impossible to have that trajectory. The prosecutors presented no medical testimony whatsoever to refute the above medical evidence. No evidence whatsoever was presented that I had a 9mm weapon. In fact, the New Jersey State Police testified that the 9mm weapon belonged to Zaid Malik Shakur, based on a holster fitting the weapon that was recovered from his body. That's a typo. There were no fingerprints or any other evidence whatsoever that linked me to any guns or ammunition. The results of the neutron activation test to determine whether or not I had fired a weapon were negative. Although Colonel Williams refers to us as the criminal element, neither Zaid or Sundiata Kohli or I were criminals. We were political activists. I was a college student until the police kicked down my door in an effort to force me to cooperate with them. And Sundiata Kohli was a computer expert who had worked for NASA before he joined the Black Panther Party and was targeted by COINTELPRO. In an obvious maneuver to provoke sympathy for the police, the NBC series juxtaposed my interview with the weeping widow of Werner Foster. While I can sympathize with her grief, I believe that her appearance was deliberately included to appeal to people's emotions, to blur the facts, to make me look like a villain, and to create the kind of lynch mob mentality that has historically been associated with white women portrayed as victims of Black people. In essence, the supposed interview with me became a forum for the new state police, Forrester's widow, and the obvious hostile commentary of Ralph Penzer. The two initial programs together lasted 3.5 minutes. Me, 59 seconds, the widow, 50 seconds, the state police, 38 seconds, and Penzer, 68 seconds. Not once in the interview was I ever asked about Zaid, Sundiata, or their families. As the interview went on, it was painfully evident that Ralph Penzer would never see me as a human being. Although I had tried to talk about racism and about the victims of government and police repression, it was clear that he was totally uninterested. I will now pass it on to Dee, I believe.
Hi, good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Like most poor and oppressed people in the United States, I do not have a voice. Black people, poor people in the US have no real freedom of speech, no real freedom of expression.
Wait, sorry to cut you off. I think you might be ahead of us.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I thought that was
Yeah.
so I think that I've stated publicly on various occasions. I think we're 2 pages before you.
Page 7.
7.
7. On the open letter?
Yeah. Do you want, Ryan, do you want to read this section, and then when Dee finds it, we can pass it to her?
Totally.
We'll read a little bit more so you can find it, and then we'll pass it on to you, Dee.
Okay, sounds good.
I have stated publicly on various occasions that I was ashamed of participating in my trial in New Jersey because it was so racist, and I did testify. Even though I was extremely limited by the judge as to what I could testify about, I testified as clearly as I could about what happened that night. After being almost fatally wounded, I managed to climb in the back seat of the car to get away from the shooting. Sundiata drove the car 5 miles down the road, carried me into a grassy area because he was afraid that the police would see the car parked on the side of the road and just start shooting into it again. Yes, it was 5 miles down the highway where I was captured, dragged out of the car, stomped, and then left on the ground. Although I drifted in and out of consciousness, I remember clearly that both while I was lying on the ground and while I was in the ambulance, I kept hearing the state troopers ask, quote, "Is she dead yet?" End quote. Because of my condition, I have no independent recollection of how long I was on the ground or how long it was before the ambulance was allowed to leave the hospital, but in the trial transcript, Trooper Harper stated that it was while he was being questioned, sometime after 2 a.m., that a detective told him that I had just been brought into the hospital. I was the only live, quote, suspect, end quote, in custody, and prior to that time, Harper had never told anyone that a woman had shot him. As I watched Governor Whitman's interview, the one thing that struck me was her outrage at my joy about being a grandmother and my, quote, quiet, nice life, end quote, as she put it here in Cuba. Well, I love the Cuban people and the solidarity they have shown me. The pain of being torn away from everybody I love has been intense. I have never had the opportunity to see or hold my grandchild. If Governor Whitman thinks that my life has been so nice that 50 years of dealing with racism, poverty, persecution, brutality, prison, underground, exile, and blatant lies has been so nice, then I'd be more than happy to let her walk in my shoes for a while so she can get a taste of how it feels. I am a proud black woman, and I am not about to get on the television and cry for Ralph Penza or any other journalists. But the way I have suffered in my lifetime and the way my people have suffered, only God can bear witness to. Colonel.
Have you found it? Do you feel ready to? No. All right.
I have the open letter. I don't see where you guys are now.
All right.
I can. I have like a page and a half left, and then where you read like most poor and oppressed people, I could pass it off to you there if you want.
Okay, perfect.
Cool.
Sorry about that, Dee.
That's okay.
Colonel Williams of the New Jersey State Police stated, quote, "We would do everything we could to go get her off the island of Cuba, and if that includes kidnapping, we would do it," end quote. I guess the theory is that if they could kidnap millions of Africans from Africa 400 years ago, they should be able to kidnap one African woman today. If it is nothing but an attempt to bring about the reincarnation of the Fugitive Slave Act. All I represent is just another slave that they want to bring back into the plantation. Well, I might be a slave, but I will go to my grave a rebellious slave. I am, and I feel like, a maroon woman. I will never voluntarily accept the condition of slavery, whether it's de facto or ipso facto, official or unofficial. In another recent interview, Williams talked about asking the federal government to add to the $50,000 reward for my capture. He also talked about seeking, quote, outside money or something like that, a benefactor, whatever, end quote. Now, who is looking to, quote, contribute, end quote, to the cause? The Ku Klux Klan, the neo-Nazi parties, the white militia organizations? But the plot gets even thicker. He says that the money might lure bounty hunters. Quote, "There are individuals out there, I guess they call themselves soldiers of fortune, who might be interested in doing something, in turning her over to us," end quote. Well, in the old days, they used to call them slave catchers, trackers, or patter rollers. Now they are called mercenaries. Neither the governor nor the state police say one word about, quote, justice, end quote. They have no moral authority to do so. The level of their moral and ethical bankruptcy is evident in their eagerness to not only break the law and hire hoodlums, all in the name of, quote, law and order, end quote. But you know what gets to me? What makes me truly indignant? With the schools in Paterson, New Jersey falling down, with areas of Newark looking like a disaster area, with the crack epidemic, with the widespread poverty and the unemployment in New Jersey, these depraved, decadent, would-be slave masters want federal funds to help put this, quote, N-word wench, end quote, back in her place. They call me the quote, most wanted woman in America. I find that ironic. I've never felt very, quote, wanted before. When it came to jobs, I was never the most wanted. When it came to economic opportunities, I was never the most wanted. When it came to decent housing, I was never the most wanted. It seems like the only time Black people are on the most wanted list, it is when they want to put us in prison. But at this moment, I am not so concerned about myself. Everybody has to die sometime, and all I want to go with is dignity. I am more concerned about the growing poverty, the growing despair that is rife in America. I am more concerned about our younger generations who represent our future. I am more concerned that 1/3 of young blacks are either in prison or under the jurisdiction of the quote criminal and justice system, end quote. I am more concerned about the rise of the prison industrial complex that is turning our people into slaves again. I am more concerned about the repression, the police brutality, violence, the rising wave of racism that makes up the political landscape of the US today. Our young people deserve a future, and I consider it the mandate of my ancestors to be part of the struggle to ensure that they have one. They have the right to live free from political repression. The US is becoming more and more of a police state, and that fact compels us to fight against political repression. I urge you all, every single person who reads this statement, to fight to free all political prisoners. As the concentration camps in the US turn into death camps, I urge you to fight to abolish the death penalty. I make a special urgent appeal to you to fight and save the life of Mumia Abu Jamal, the only political prisoner who is currently on death row. It has been a long time since I have lived inside the United States, but during my lifetime, I have seen every prominent black leader, politician, or activist come under attack by the establishment media. When African Americans appear on news programs, they are usually talking about sports, entertainment, or they are in handcuffs. When we have a protest, they ridicule it, minimize it, or cut the numbers of the people who attended in half. The news is big business, and it is operated by affluent white men. Unfortunately, they shape the way that many people see the world, and even the way people see themselves. Too often, black journalists and other journalists of color mimic their white counterparts. They often gear their reports to reflect the foreign policies and the domestic policies of the same people who are oppressing their people. In the establishment media, the bombing and the murder of thousands of innocent women and children in Libya or Iraq or Panama is seen as, quote, patriotic, end quote, while those who fight for freedom, no matter where they are seen as radicals, extremists, or terrorists. All right, do you want to take over?
Sure, I still don't know where you stop, but on the page.
Like most poor and oppressed people.
Okay, that's where, okay, I'll start there.
Yep.
Can everyone hear me? Okay. Like most poor and oppressed people in the United States, I do not have a voice. Black people, poor people in the US have no real freedom of speech, no real freedom of expression, and very little freedom of the press. The Black press and progressive media have historically played an essential role in the struggle for social justice. We need to continue and to expand that tradition. We need to create media outlets that help to educate our people and our children and not annihilate their minds. I am only one woman. I own no TV stations or radio stations or newspapers, but I feel that people need to be educated as to what is going on and to understand the connection between the news media and the instruments of repression in America. All I have is my voice, my spirit, and the will to tell the truth. But I sincerely ask those of you in Black media, those of you in the progressive media, those of you who believe in truth, freedom, to publish a statement and to let people know what is happening. We have no voice, so you must be the voice of the voiceless. Free all political prisoners. I send you love and revolutionary greetings from Cuba, one of the largest, most resistant, and the most courageous maroon camp that has ever existed on the face of this planet. Assata Shakur. I'll pass on to someone else.
Thank you, Dee. I think that's the end of our reading tonight. I wanted to show a video from NBC that she has been referencing in the reading. Yeah, there's two parts. I figured we'd start with the first part. It's only 4 minutes and 30 seconds. We can also watch the second part. And Joan also said that she has Assata Shakur's open letter to the Pope on hand, and I'm sure we can find that online too. So if folks are wanting to read more, we can do that. If folks would like to have discussion after this, we can. But for now, I'm going to screen share and we'll watch this. Let me know if the sound is good. One second.
She is a heroine to some. As a fighter for black rights, she is a villain to others who believe she hides her crimes behind revolutionary rhetoric. Back in the 1970s, Assata Shakur was known as the soul of the self-styled Black Liberation Army, an armed group implicated in the killings of several police officers. In New Jersey, Governor Whitman has posted a $50,000 reward for her capture. Meet her now in Cuba. As she walks through Havana streets, she is just another shopper. She passes almost unnoticed by Cubans. Her name is Assata Shakur. In the United States, she is known by the police and FBI as Joanne Chesimard, one of the nation's most wanted fugitives. Wanted for what police describe as the cold-blooded execution of a New Jersey state trooper back in the 70s. She denies it and says of the state cops,
"They want to just kill me. They want to see me dead."
Chesimard was convicted in the killing of Trooper Werner Foster and the wounding of another trooper in a furious shootout on the New Jersey Turnpike in East Brunswick. That's where Chesimard was wounded, and one of two men in the car with her was killed. The other later captured. Police say that after Trooper Forrester was shot down, his own gun was ripped from his holster and 2 bullets were fired into his brain. After her capture in that deadly shootout, she was sentenced to life in prison. In 1979, with the help of 3 armed men, she broke out of the women's prison in Clinton, New Jersey.
She made her break this afternoon from the prison in Clinton, New Jersey, and lawmen once called her the soul of the Black Liberation Army.
Chesimard went underground and then surfaced in the 1980s in Cuba under Fidel Castro's protection. Now, at 50 and a grandmother, she agreed to talk with me in Havana. Chesimard, or Assata Shakur, insisted she had killed no one and was railroaded by an all-white jury and by what she called racist New Jersey state troopers.
Did you shoot Werner Foster?
No, I did not. I was shot with my arms in the air, then shot again in the back, and then left on the ground to die.
That is absolutely false. Our investigation shows that Joanne Chesimard initiated the conflict. She reached into her pocketbook, pulled out a 9mm weapon, and started firing at Trooper Harper.
Were you holding a weapon?
No, I was not. No.
Well, after almost 25 years, the roadway area has changed somewhat, but this is the spot where the shooting occurred. Joanne Chesimard was in the front seat on the passenger side. The driver of the car and Trooper Forrester were in the back of the car. It was after midnight, and shots rang out.
Harper, who was the other police
Correct.
that was at the
other
scene,
trooper,
started to shoot. And, you know, after that, everything is like foggy. It was horrible. It was like a prolonged version of hell. You know, I felt like, you know, everything was moving around. My chest started to explode. My head started to explode. And the next thing I knew, you know, they were coming by me and saying, "Is she dead yet? Is she dead yet?" And I was later taken to a hospital, and I was beaten. I was tortured.
I think that, you know, as so happens so often with the criminal element, they have a tendency to turn things around, and they become the victim. We got to remember that, number one, there's a trooper who is dead.
And why did Assata Shakur escape from prison using hostages as a shield instead of appealing her case to higher courts?
I never received justice. And I escaped, A, because I was afraid for my life, and B, because I knew that I would never receive justice.
As to Chesimard's claim that she was left on the ground to die, Colonel Williams told me she and her Confederate actually sped away in their car 5 miles down the turnpike before she was finally captured, and that it was Trooper Forrester who was left on the ground to die. The Clinton, New Jersey prison from which Chesimard escaped has been rebuilt with much tighter security.
NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe.
So I thought,
Stop sharing.
pause sharing?
Stop sharing.
Oh. I thought that'd be important to show what she's referencing and kind of the distortion of her story and the way they manipulated that interview. I think let's show the second part as well, and then maybe we'll decide if we want to have discussion.
This is a brand new MacBook Pro and our prototype sleeves first drop test. Here we go. 3, 2.
You're going to see two messages tonight to Joanne Chesimard. One from the widow of the New Jersey State Trooper Chesimard was convicted of killing some 20 years ago, a murder Chesimard denies. The other message is from the New Jersey State Police. And in my exclusive interview with her, Chesimard expressed her fears of what the troopers just might do.
I'm afraid that they might assassinate me. They might try to kidnap me.
Joanne Chesimard, who calls herself Asada Shakur, talking to me in Havana, Cuba, talking of her fears that the New Jersey State Police will somehow find a way to get to her.
These people will stop at nothing.
In 1979, Shakur escaped from a New Jersey prison where she was serving life for the murder of State Trooper Werner Forrester. Police said he was executed with his own gun.
It was such an unfair trial, such by an all-white jury.
Joanne Chesimard is the #1 fugitive for the New Jersey State Police.
The head of the state police intently watched a tape of my interview with the convicted cop killer as she claimed state troopers tortured her in the hospital.
You know, they stick their hands in the wounds. Does it hurt here? Does it hurt here?
In almost 25 years, and I'm sure that she's replayed this and turned it around to her benefit many, many times.
Shakur portrayed herself as a fighter for racial justice by what she called armed struggle if necessary.
People have the right to free themselves from oppression by whatever means they deem possible.
She is not a heroine. She's a murderer.
Colonel Williams called Shakur's fears of police assassination ludicrous, but then he gave me this startling comment.
We would do everything we could to get her off the island of Cuba, and if that includes kidnapping, we would do it.
Colonel Williams told me the police determination to recapture Chesimard is fired by the memory of Trooper Forrester on the memorial wall.
She killed my husband.
Rose Forrester, the trooper's widow. Their son was just 3.5 years old when her husband was gunned down.
My son lost his dad, grew up without a dad. You know, he never saw his son going to school. Took for a soccer game, taking him fishing. And then he got married a year and a half ago. Never saw him getting married. And I think my son really missed to have a dad.
I say to her that I am totally sorry that her husband was killed. I did not kill him.
She is sorry. I doubt it that she is sorry. No. I think they know that what they were doing that night.
Anyone who suffers a loss is in great pain. And I hope that she understands my pain as well.
She don't know what suffering is.
As for Colonel Williams' statement to me that he was prepared to kidnap Joanne Chesimard from Cuba, later in the interview he said that only lawful actions would be taken, but he didn't elaborate. The top state police official added that even now, almost 2 decades after her prison escape, he has a detective working full-time on the Chesimard case. Williams told me, and I'm quoting, Chesimard better be looking over her shoulder all the time.
NBC News fan.
So this is obviously really loaded. There's a lot that we just took in, but something that I feel like probably this is a good time for discussion. I don't know if other folks are feeling that way. Maybe we could see like thumbs up if we'd like to discuss now, or if we'd like to keep reading, we can. I guess I can't really see everyone's thumbs. I'm okay. Looks like okay. So I think we'll have a discussion. I can prompt with some thoughts and a question maybe, but something that Asada Shakur wrote about in her piece was that they really didn't give her as much time as she would have liked. You know, the fact that they even had the widow speak for more time than they had her speak is a statement in and of itself. And I think it's just really important for us to look at how her narrative was really consistently opposed in the whole piece that they put together. You know, and it really felt like in an effort to completely quell her points the entire time. And that they're still using the rhetoric that had been disproved in the courts of what she had done. So I guess a question to prompt would be like, what are the moments that stuck out to you as anything poignant that stuck out to you watching that video post listening to the reading, or even something that came out in the reading?
How little has changed. Could be a story from today. Probably is.
I'm thinking that not only nothing has changed, but people get killed now for nothing. I mean, when the last 6 months, we have seen people being arrested and eventually dying, losing their life, not for social activism or for nothing. This is why people, I think, are getting mad. I mean, she's very emblematic. I mean, this lady is just, you know, first of all, she's very lucky to be alive. And she really she was very learned and very, you know, very articulate, and she was able to pass on her knowledge and her ideas. But I'm thinking about all the people who recently have lost their lives, who didn't have a voice and who didn't have really a message. They just killed literally for being black in the streets, not for being, you know, this kind of terrorist they depicted her as, but just for being alive and black. And that is so outrageous that it's literally 50 years ago. Voilà.
I think just noting from the very beginning of her case through, or from the time of the event, how immediately all of the machinery of the media and judicial, all of institutions of authority were geared up to frame the meaning of the story and the interpretation of it. And now, you know, decades after the fact, it's the same thing. And just, it's amazing what they can get away with, what passes as journalism. I mean, like, no questioning of the police officers. You know, the police officer was given statements as that side and then her side, and there were no experts, no one who had done investigative work to shed light on all of the questions that were raised during the trial and after, and to put testimony of the police officers into question, which there's a ton of. It's, you know, I don't know what else to say. It's just emblematic of that too, just what free reign these institutions have to frame everything surrounding these deaths.
I'd like to say that we have, I have a question though. She has not, well, not a question, but a point to make that she really has, if she has not received a fair trial at all, which it sounds like she has not, because she was tried in the media before she was tried in court. She really hasn't received a fair trial to this point. And we really don't know the facts. we know a few things that she has said, and we know what the police officer said at that, that was interviewed, and we know that she was convicted. But I don't think, I am reluctant, although I'm sympathetic to her, I'm reluctant to say that she is telling the truth until she has a fair trial. I mean, is that a ridiculous, I mean, it's kind of a devil's advocate approach to this conversation, and I don't mean to be an outlander here, but she just hasn't received a fair trial. We don't know the facts. But the facts we know are that the media then, convicted her beforehand, and that she was convicted in a court of law. But I find I'm sympathetic to her, but I have no idea whether she's innocent until such a court, she gets a fair trial, which she probably will never do, because she won't ever be in the United States again if she knows what's good for her. I know that's a controversial point of view, but I'm reluctant to go on and make extrapolations from this, except, sort of on, assumptions, because all we're doing is assuming that she is innocent, which I strongly assume she is, but how do I know that?
Could I jump in really quickly?
Oh. Yeah, I just wanted to say really quick that there actually is like mounds of evidence, and there's so much more research that I really suggest doing, like Assata's autobiography I just put in the chat that explains a lot of how things were twisted and distorted, and she did have multiple trials that were twisted and distorted with multiple sets of facts coming out. There's also documentaries to watch.
It's also interest, like I put a podcast in on the chat bar. It's stuff you should know. It's pretty, I found it very informative. It talked a lot about the Black Panther Party and how the FBI was actively trying to destroy them, kind of for no reason whatsoever other than propagating fear into the United States and using them and
not no reason, because they're outwardly and outrightly racist.
Yeah, because
anti-Black sentiment.
No legitimate reason, I should say. So, and if Assata Shakur is kind of a face of the Black Panther Party, then they will, like, police officers in the FBI will get her at any means necessary, i.e. saying that they are literally willing to go to Cuba and kidnapping her, which is illegal.
And I think I want Livia to talk after this. I don't want to take up too much more space, but I wanted to say that part of why I intended to choose this reading for tonight was that I think it's really important to highlight the way the media works and the way that narratives are skewed from, really intentional perspectives. So there's so much more research that needs to be done about Assata's life and about the various ways she was framed, that it's actually impossible to do in this kind of format. So I thought this would be a good start to honor her and honor her birthday, and also to say, let's look at this, and then there's so much more research to be done after this. But Livia, I'm gonna hand it off.
Oh yeah, and I think Red was gonna say something too, but I was just gonna say, the real basics that we know are that she was shot and that the two people she was with were killed, as well as the police officer being dead. So those are very, very concrete facts that we know, and there's very concrete evidence that the other officer lied about the position she was in when she was shot. So I just wanted to say that's like super concrete evidence that is very much on the table.
Yeah, thanks for both saying that. I mean, my question, my reply was a bit reactionary, but I feel like it's needed to be said. Maria, to what extent, like, where is the fair trial element that you're expecting her to come back to? Because there is like this country is just systemically like unfair in its trialing of people that resist it systemically, you know? And it's like, if she were to return and go on trial, there is no guarantee that it will be fair. And so it's just like, I kind of get the point of, you know, asking that question. But I think that it kind of implies that, you know, she's still guilty until proven innocent, which is not the case. You know, it's like, yeah, I just don't think we can really run under the assumption that all political activists and people that have resisted the US empire are guilty until proven innocent. I think that we need to take the opposite approach and to look at the fact that the guilty member is most likely to be the state in questions regarding resistance to the state, and we should start to support them from that angle first, and not have a suspicion from the get-go, because it just creates an environment where we're not actually able to support people getting freed from jail that are political prisoners, and to really support the movement of people that need to. You know, we were very close. I posted a documentary called COINTELPRO 101 that I advise everyone watch, and you can just see to what extent, like, you know, if they weren't killed, they were incarcerated. This is like the grand majority of political activists in the United States over decades were put away. And that's because the US, because it's so violent, is so proximal to actual genuine revolutionary change because of how much people need it to happen. And I think it's super important to be aware of that fact, and to look at, you know, look at the fact that, yeah, this country has basically killed and imprisoned everyone that they actually find a threat. I mean, yeah, you can look at any example, and you can look at Fred Hampton or anyone that tried to kind of create moments where it was the potential for change was huge. And yeah, I just think that it'd be better to side on the side of the people that are being oppressed and not the other way around. The fact.
Thanks, Red. I also just want to bring into the conversation that
Excuse me, Ryan, excuse me. I just want to have a question for Red, because Red, what is it about what I said that I am proposing that she's guilty until proven guilty? I think that's what you assumed.
How could she have a fair trial in a rigged system?
No, but I want to ask Red, what he said, that what I said was implied that I assumed she was guilty until proven guilty, which personally, anybody who knows me would know that that would be incorrect.
Yes, absolutely. It wasn't a personal statement. It was, I said guilty until proven innocent because...
No, well, that's what I meant. I'm sorry, I got it confused. Sorry, she's guilty until proven innocent. What is it in what I said that led you to say that?
Because you said that you have no way of knowing that she isn't guilty unless she comes back for fair trial, which...
No, I didn't say that. I really, and well...
You
yeah, you did, Maria.
No, I'm not, I guess I missed...
Sorry, to side rail this. I'm gonna ask that we move on and have more space for other folks to voice what they're... I want to move back to the topic, which is discussing Assata Shakur and discussing any insight or feelings or thoughts that arose from this reading.
Gracias, Lily. I have something. I was struck in the reading by, there was a line where she said something along the lines of, everyone dies or everyone is going to die, but I want to die with dignity. And I just thought that was a very powerful human notion, human concept, the desire to die with dignity. And I found that very powerful and very moving.
I just wanted to interject something kind of anecdotal regarding a remark someone made about the fact that she was the step aunt of Tupac Shakur. And someone said, well, I didn't know that 15 years ago. And I taught in a school where the majority of residents were Black. And, when you have daily contact, you realize how intelligent and compassionate and articulate what my students could be. And we had very interesting discussion about, this family relation. And that made me look at all the musics and all the artists that my students were listening to. It made me look at them and listen to these artists in a different way. And I think it's important to put things in perspective. This is just one small thing, but yes, to answer one of the comments about Tupac Shakur and his great aunt. So yes, there is definitely something to learn about a certain type of artist and music. It's just something that really struck me at the time.
Just like that. Oh, yeah. I just wanted to add to that. Yeah, the image of Tupac Shakur is often really, like depoliticized in the media, but like just like many people whose families and whose community was under attack during that period, was actually very vocal about the things facing Black people at the time, especially in the 90s, and in his music was incredibly obvious about it. And it's just interesting to what extent it gets kind of glossed over and made kind of popular and reduced by the media in ways that we even saw in the NBC clip. There's always an attempt to wield the media to kind of discourage like revolutionary thought, and I think that he was very much a proponent of it, and that's not often like remembered or brought up. So
yeah, one line that I think this kind of relates, just that really stood out to me, was when she says, we need to create media outlets that help to educate our people and our children and not annihilate their minds, which is just like so striking and like rings so strongly into this moment that we're living in, when you look at the role of how people get their news and where they get their news, and then just looking at what are the tools to educate in our culture as opposed to annihilate, and music and art can be that. Hopefully, better news outlets too, but.
I just looked up, I just Googled her now to see what was going on now. And she's still really framed in the way that she was initially framed, where it just says she was a former member of the Black Liberation Army who was convicted of being an accomplice in the first-degree murder of state trooper during a shootout in on the New Jersey Turnpike. And it says wanted by the FBI. So this is still very much alive, and they've got old pictures of her. So she's still suffering that. Just to throw that in there.
That's very sad. And what that tells us that her facts and her position has not come out. That's what's really sad. I think that's what I was going for in what I was saying. The media is Facebook. It's all like a backdoor into our consciousness, and we tend to be conditioned by it and directed in our thinking by it. That's the part that's really sad, is that the current media is picking up on what the old media said because there's no new content, and that's unfortunately what we're lacking here.
Yeah, I was really shocked to see that it hadn't been adjusted to at least include her point of view in it. She's still just labeled that way that they did in the newsreel from long ago.
Well, the systems that are in power want to retain their power. So there's no incentive to the way that government and society operate now, which gives unearned privilege to white and white passing individuals, to change those stories, even if they're entirely false. So for what this brings up for me is I have to ask myself, how am I complicit in that narrative? Where am I benefiting from it in ways that I don't deserve, and how can I undo that? Because it's a comfortable position, and it's a luxury for me to say, oh yeah, that's too bad. That's like a position I'm taking on the sidelines, and that comes from being white. I couldn't say that if I were Black, Indigenous, or a person of color. Oh, that's too bad, and just go on with my life and go, oh, the news hasn't changed. Oh, well, it should change. But for me, it's a question of conversations like this are really important, because if we land it on what am I going to do now? What will I personally do? What can I unlearn, or what can I learn to change the way that I interpret and engage with the stories that I see?
Good point.
The way law works. I was talking with my dad about the O.J. Simpson trial.
I really appreciate that point, Emily Jane, and I wanted to say that there is so much work to be done right now, and there's so much work accessible to us right now, particularly because we're living in a time where, we have computers and we have, the internet, and we have the ability to mobilize on a scale that we have never really seen. So I just wanted to shout out that on the Metabolic Instagram, on the bio, there's a Google Doc, which I update every morning with a daily list of actions and events for anyone who's wanting an easy step in to figure out how to engage on a daily level.
I wanted to jump in and say that in reading briefly about her, it seems that it's not just the murder that she was put in jail for, but there's a whole crime resume that's posted on Wikipedia under her that stretches from armed robberies and other kind of conflicts. And I think, it's interesting to sort of look at that crime out of context, but when you think of it in the larger context of the moment that she was a Black Panther and what has gone on since then, the 40-year movement for Black liberation, her voice and what she represents, and the fact that she's called a terrorist, is linked not just to one murder, but it seems like her potency as a figurehead for a moment in time in our history. And I thought emotionally seeing her sort of speak in the video made me realize the simple phrase Black Lives Matter is not something that could be taken for granted. There was a sort of tacit and implicit evaluation that it was the white life that was lost that mattered, and that her life was just of a lower order. There's an implicit feeling I got around that, which I think is also there. I don't think so. I heard that too, but I don't think so.
When I first saw this product, I thought it looked kind of...
I was just going to share something. I was thinking back to a few times that I've heard still living Black Panthers speak, kind of like that are still alive today. And one of the times recently was at an anniversary of the establishment of the Young Lords, which was a Puerto Rican resistance movement in the vein of the Black Lives, in the vein of the Black Panther Party, that kind of did a lot of similar programs and stuff for Puerto Ricans across the US. And it's just shocking how little original Black Panthers are even left alive, you know? And that's just something else to like bear in mind, you know? It's like, that's how many people have died and been incarcerated. And that's why, you know, the case of someone having escaped and made it to Cuba and us hearing their story and them being very eloquent and stuff is super important. But yeah, it's like by no means, like she's an anomaly, not because of her case, but because of the fact that she's alive. And that there's so many people that got killed and that whose names we'll probably never know about, and that have just been, you know, that who got written down as being murdered or found in a ditch somewhere or something that we'll just never be able to trace back to police or state violence. And so, you know, you really wonder how much of a threat it was to the United States sense of national, like, continuation as a power structure, and just, yeah, to think of how important it is now to keep people safe, and that Black Lives Matter is because we need this country to change, and so we need them to stay alive. We need people to stay alive and to keep doing the work that they're doing. So yeah, I just always found that nuts. It was like, he said, I can't remember the name of the man himself, but he was like, there's like 5 of us left on the West Coast, or maybe in LA he was referring to. And it's like how, you know, I mean, yeah, he's in his 80s or 70s, but that just shouldn't be the case. And it's just, yeah, it's something to bear in mind.
Something else that strikes me about this, you know, looking at it as a history lesson, is that just that this struggle's been going on since the beginning of this country, since Europeans first showed up here. And so it's nothing new, but it's new that so many white people and white identified people are starting to actually learn about it and understand it and see that it's actually been a war going on for centuries. And to come to find ourselves in that, and so that takes some reckoning with it, with our own past. And so I think that the looking at a moment that's from our past collectively like this is really useful, because it gives us a lens into what's happening right now, you know, where we have a government that's still saying that systemic racism doesn't exist, when actually the police were established in the first place to protect slave owners' property. And that hasn't changed. That mandate is still what plays out. And so until we look at those historical imperatives and what that means, we can't fully engage with how to dismantle the system. So it's really compelling to me to look at this now, to realize, okay, her birthday was yesterday, my birthday was last week. What can I do with my life to make a difference, you know, so that 50 years from now we're not just still looking at more stories like this and wondering when justice is going to come.
I think to add to what you were saying, Emily, interestingly enough, and I know Maya, you laid this out very well when we had discussed, you know, privately as the metabolic team when the first of the uprisings was happening. But you know, a lot of rioting is often framed within, you know, like destruction of property and everything like that. But you know, the original resistances that happened in the first days and months and years that Black people were, you know, brought here and enslaved here were the burning of slave plantations, the burning of the private property and property of these slave drivers. So it's like that these aren't like anomalies or kind of recent like weird materialistic frustrations with the power structure. These are like super the core of how oppressed people have resisted what happens in this country. And so yeah, I just think in that lens, in a capitalist framework where you're put to work in malls and put to work in different areas of work, burning those spaces and places down can be seen and should be seen in some of the same light. And anyone saying that it's the destruction of property, you kind of have to reckon with that history too.
Something that I think is important to note about Assata's autobiography, and I really do highly recommend giving it a read. It's available as an audiobook as well, and it's not, you know, it's an enjoyable read as well as just being really important right now. But something that really stuck out to me listening to that interview with the police was essentially that they were saying they were also kind of by any means necessary interested in capturing her. And part of what was so shocking having read that book is the way that they really psychologically tortured Assata Shakur's family post her escape and also during her time in prison, including pretending to be her, calling her family, you know, framing them, and essentially like yeah, torturing them, using psychological tactics to get them to break because they thought that she was being hidden by them. But just the ways that, like, manipulation tactics and ways that, it's interesting, like, to hear the widow of the police officer who passed away saying, like, you know, Assata Shakur doesn't know suffering. And just seeing the amount that Assata Shakur's life has really been not only side railed, but defined by suffering, you know, defined by the way that the United States has targeted her from the get-go as a political activist. And just the tactics that they use are really appalling. So I think it's important to remember that, like, regardless of like what, I don't know, what, like, quote guilty or quote innocent means in the grand scheme of things, I think we have to look at this system and understand that guilty and innocent become really skewed when you understand the historical narrative at play here and the ways that oppressed people have to fight back. You know, it has to come to a point where people really say enough is enough. And once you really kind of dissect that moment, once people say enough is enough, it's really difficult to untangle what guilty and innocent means, because anyone who's complicit in a system that treats people the way that Assata Shakur and her family and those who passed away with her, or she's still living, but who were with her who passed away, were treated, you know, I would say those people are guilty, and that, you know, all of us who are complicit in this system we are also guilty. You know, especially white folks, because if we're not actively working to tear this apart, we are also complicit. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I appreciate what Red mentioned about the importance of rioting, and I wanted to say that part of what's really critical right now is to recognize that in a system that values private property over human life, rioting is often actually a really important tactic to uproot and to change the narrative. I understand that it gets skewed in the perspective of, oh, well, these people are destructive. But I think we should really untie what we mean by destructive, because when people's literal lives are at stake and people have been oppressed for so many hundreds of years and made to feel afraid for just being Black or brown, it's important for us to understand what destructive means, you know, and really take that apart.
As in being pulled over for an apparent brake light and being Black and have a Vermont license plate as a reason to be suspicious. Case in point.
Yeah, what really struck me is that it's just this sanctioned, like, hunting of her and, like, vilification by the media, and then she's a fugitive and they're still looking for her, and, you know, it's just disgusting that you know, even, yeah, that it all started with a tail light.
George Floyd started with an apparent fake $20 bill.
Exactly. And cigarette, was it for Eric Garner? You know, the preoccupation.
Selling cigarettes, yeah.
Unbelievable.
Which all of those are more examples of what I think. I'm still learning everyone's names. I think what Maya was saying about property being valued above life. You know, if a $20 bill or a cigarette is more valuable, then that's evidence of the problem that we're facing.
Totally.
I find it absolutely incredible that she's listed as one of the on the top 10 terrorists in our country today. I mean, even that list has to be looked at, and you know what, who sets that list up? I mean, that's just so out of proportion. And you know, there's a $2 million you know, bounty on her head.
This is probably beyond the scope of this conversation, but like having been a kid that grew up from, you know, around the 2000s and around like the years of 9/11 happening, remembering it as a kid happening, and having the entire world like conversation be dominated by the word terrorist for so many years, and just thinking, what is the most active use of terrorism on the planet? Is just all, like, for so long been the American state. And yeah, just, I mean, it's almost laughable to even hear the word these days. I mean, anyone they call terrorist is like almost guaranteed to be someone who's like upending. I mean, I'm not like a terrorist absolver here, but I'm just saying that like it's just kind of rich coming from the United States of America.
Well, and now the protesters are being, you know, categorized as such, you know, and who knows what sort of lengths are being gone to target and criminalize dissenting voices within this protest movement. It's pretty scary how that term is being thrown around and what's going on in Portland right now with the federal whoever these people are that are being brought in with unmarked vans to restore order, and having the opposite effect. Pretty scary.
Yeah, it's like an experiment they're doing in Portland with the privatized military picking up people in, like you said, unmarked cars.
I'm from Oregon, and it's brutal to accept. It's really hard for me to accept that that is happening, but I see the video, and it's real, but it's very hard to reconcile that that is actually happening in where I grew up.
Maya, you don't happen to have any like insight into this situation, given that you have friends there? Because I was actually super curious to ask you anyhow, because I'm assuming you have people on the ground there. But I mean, from everything you gathered, the Portland police is yeah.
I keep talking and I don't want to take up so much space because I want to hear other people's voices and thoughts, but I wanted to jump in there. So thank you for calling me out, Red. I went to college in Portland, and I'm only 2 years out of graduating. I have lots of friends who are currently protesting in Portland, and it's really frightening. And it's been frightening in Portland, you know, since the beginning. Portland police is the most systemically racist and dangerous police force in this country, far above NYPD and LAPD. They have countless hate crimes, and just generally they're pretty corrupt.
Tied to white supremacy.
Portland in and of itself, and Oregon in general, is really a white supremacist kind of stronghold at this point, and it's a really dangerous place for people of color, which is really unfortunate because Portland also, and Oregon also, is a beautiful place and has a lot of incredible assets to offer, and incredible communities. But one thing I wanted to say is that the occupation in Portland right now is really frightening. And there are ways that we can all get engaged by calling our representatives and making sure that our senators and our congresspeople are voicing dissent now, because this, like you all said, this is a testing ground for what's going to happen if these protests, and as they should, continue. But one thing I did want to say is that it's not just that people are being taken away in unmarked cars. There are literal snipers positioned on top of buildings aimed at people. 2 protesters have been shot in the skull with, quote, less than lethal weapons already. Both of them had their skulls shattered in multiple places. Both of them are alive, but in, you know, seriously critical condition. It's really frightening. And it's also frightening because Portland police is already so corrupt. Not that these are the police, these are federal troops, but I've never experienced police brutality the way I've experienced it in Portland. You know, I'm like a small white girl and I was afraid for my life. So you can imagine what literally anyone else would feel. It's a really dangerous situation there. So it's pretty upsetting to hear about the federal occupation there. But I do appreciate, Red, that you called me out here, because I do have a lot of friends there, and it's a lot of people who are really afraid.
Yeah, you know, it's just hard to know. Like, I'm always suspicious about the police. I mean, always, obviously, but just especially when you see videos of people like saying that type of stuff, you don't want to immediately jump to, like, you know, the kind of conspiratorial end of the spectrum and get like immediately like, oh, they're just grabbing people off the street and everything, which you can see in the video is the case. But it doesn't come as much surprise I mean, it does come as a surprise, but it's just like, it's important to check up and see what's going on the ground, because you often, I mean, it's the case that the American police have been testing out being more and more authoritarian over the last few years. And yeah, it's just no joke. Everyone should be super concerned about their ability to do that. If you do have any places that are like accessible to everyone or other people that are keeping an eye on what's going on in Portland, I'd love to know if you've got accounts or people.
I don't know of anyone posting anything right now about on the ground stuff, but I've just been checking up on friends who are there. And yeah, I do know that one of my friends, Annie, her friend was arrested yesterday by the federal troops in an unmarked car, and was cuffed for multiple hours, you know, without any understanding of what was going on. And eventually, I guess he was let off without any charges against him, because they're saying that they're now giving out what's it called? Felony charges for protesters. But I know that he was let off without a felony charge, but he's still awaiting like confirmation whether that's the case. So it's possible that he will be charged with a felony, which is like, you know, can be the end of someone's life. So it's
won't be able to vote anymore.
Yeah, it's really scary. But if I do hear of any folks who are posting on the ground stuff, I'll share that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's just. Yeah, every day it's like you just get surprised by this country, and yeah, it's good to stay somewhat on top of it. I don't want to keep on talking either, but in absence of anyone else doing it, I will continue to talk. I shared a link to a book that you shouldn't buy on Amazon, but is worth looking at, or at the very least, just looking into. At the beginning of the article, the Asata Shukor article, it talks about maroon communities, and I think it's really worth reading up about maroon communities across the Americas, because it gives great insight into. Oh, I have someone at the door who's coming to fix my the swamp cooler in the house because it's blowing hot air. So shall leave you all. Check out maroon communities.
Put your mask on.
Thank you for the reminder.
Thank you, Red.
Bye, Red. Good to see you.
Bye, Red.
I'm going to put that book in the chat from a bookstore called Mahogany Books that you can
They
buy
have it?
online. Yeah. Oh, wait. No, sorry, they don't. There's nothing there. Okay. Well, there are other bookstores to look at that have this book too. This was an intense discussion tonight, and also just intense topic. You know, all of these readings are really super important and super heavy. So I just wanted to thank you all for being here and being open to listening on your Friday evening. And yeah.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, guys. So thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
Say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, hi, June.
There's Jen. Say hi to Jen.
Hi, Judy. How are
Hi,
you?
everybody. Hi, Jen. You say hello.